So to those of you who got added to the GitHub, if you're on the GitHub, you should see a repository, which is Q2 data 2024 data analytics. If you go to that repository, you click on April 2024, you should have data folder, which will have the CSV that we use and the Jupyter notebook that we'll use. You don't have to do this now. You can't do it now. I would like, well, we'll get to it. We'll get to why we'll work on this. But then the data that we're looking at is here. It's just a Kaggle data set, nothing crazy. And the EDA Jupyter notebook, also nothing crazy. To those of you who needed it emailed, I sent you a second email actually with the data because I realized I forgot the data in the first email. So I emailed it to some of you, and then you have here the GitLab. So if anyone wants to work alongside, you can. What I would do then, if you have the GitLab or you have the GitHub invite and you have the data or you have the email, which has the Jupyter notebook in it, you can then come to Google Colab. So this is what we're working in right now. So if you could just Google Colab, really easy way to start working in Python in the cloud without actually having to download anything on your computer. You would just hit Colab. It's attached to your Google account too, which is really nice. I guess if Duke uses a Google domain, then you have all of that attached, which would be good. If not, it's okay too. And then you would hit New Notebook once you're in your account, and that's it. It's literally the whole setup. There's nothing else you actually have to do. And then if I wanted to start doing work, I forget how this is, but I think it's just scikit-learn. You could literally just import it right there. Well, I got that learn. I think it's sklearn. I'm just trying to demo how literally all you have to do is do this, and you don't have to install anything because it's already installed. You're just like borrowing someone's computer, and you're doing the work on there. So all of this is already in here for you. So that's why we're using Colab, because we don't want to worry about setting anything up on your computer or talking about Docker. So this first data analysis EDA notebook, right? All we're doing, if we look here also, we have data. Oh, there's a sample data folder, and I had uploaded, and actually it's working inside of it is in a Docker container. Interesting. I had uploaded the data, and now I don't see it. Now I actually don't know where it is. Let's see if this works. It shouldn't work because I don't see the data. Yes. So I'll probably have to re-upload the data. That makes a lot of sense, actually, because when you're working in the container, nothing actually persists. So you'll come in here, you'll hit the upload, and you'll upload the data. And you'll have to do this with the Jupyter notebook as well. You'll have to upload, or you might have to not to upload the Jupyter notebook. You could just kind of copy and paste, right? If you're working off of this. What you could do is when you actually get into it. Yes. Right here, this button, upload to session storage. You can also drag and drop like from your desktop if you want to just drag and drop it right in to the first level of data that's open when you open up the repo. And this one's pretty small also, so if you really just wanted to copy and paste this notebook, right, you could also just do this and copy it over, because there's not anything crazy we're doing. So anyway, I just wanted to give you the ability to walk through this with me, and if not, if you don't you don't have to either. And we're going to have a couple pieces where we're kind of talking about some of the stuff that's going on. So DuckDB, don't have to worry too much about DuckDB. It's just the scaffolding around the SQL that we're going to run here. Because also running SQL in a live lab would mean having some sort of SQL editor, and then that's also kind of tricky for some reason. So we'll just do DuckDB in Python, and then everything that we do will just be DuckDB commands. So if you want to dive into it, you definitely can. I'd recommend it. But if you don't, the scaffolding's here already. So we have imported DuckDB and we've loaded our data. That's it. The first two cells here. So we bring in the package that we need to start loading our data, and we load our data. DuckDB has a lot of really great functionality. So this one's just a read CSV. So you just read the CSV from the CSV that you uploaded. And then we're going to look at the columns, right? So I don't want to focus too much on the data import process, but I really want to start talking about the data we're working with, right? So if you look at the columns, no rows here. We're not actually looking at the data. We're just looking at what data do we actually have available to us. We see we have customer ID, age, gender, so we have some demographics here. item purchased, category, purchase amount. Okay, so we're buying things, location, size, color, season, some sort of like maybe clothing, review rating, subscription status, shipping type, discount applied, promo code used, previous purchase, payment method, etc. Right? So this is an e-commerce data set, and it's for like some e-commerce store that just threw a bunch of fake data in here. But we're going to use this over the next 3 sessions and maybe even into the data science session. That's the goal of this, is to use it through the next 6 sessions, really, like this one data set, to kind of stick with it and build on top of it. So we're looking at what do we have available to us, and we start picking it apart here. So we also now want to look at a couple rows to get a better understanding of what the data actually looks like. And then we'll get introduced to who you're working with and what you're working with. So the fun part of this is going to be what part of the business is the stakeholder for the specific project. So today we'll mock a project that you all are the data analyst on, and then I am the business stakeholder. So I'm going to have a question that I need solved, and in groups we'll start hypothesizing the next best step based on the questions I have and the data that you have. So that's why I say it's useful for you to have the data here, to maybe start picking it apart, but also not mandatory because we have the data here on the screen. There's a lot of columns here, so it kind of extends and it keeps going. So we'll just do that. So if you run it and you don't see this, that's what the max width here is for. The max width is just to make it visible on the screen itself. So we see customer ID. It looks like a unique ID that's just increasing as we go. The age. So we have the customer age, gender, item purchased. So we see blouse, sweater, jeans, sandals. There's a handbag. So it's kind of just all over the place, right? And then we have a category of what was purchased: clothing, footwear, outerwear, accessories, and many different categories as well. Purchase amount in US dollars is a whole number. Integer. Location is the state. State. Size. So I don't understand how a handbag has a size, but I don't do handbags. Apparently handbags have sizes. I learned something today. Color. So it's a pink handbag also. Spring. So somehow it's associated to a specific time of year. Also this handbag. But also just spring, right? Seasonality for clothes. Review rating. Is ambiguous because I'm not sure if it's the rating, like the average rating that the customer leaves, or it's the average rating of the product. I think it's the average rating of the product. Subscription status, definitely about the client or the customer that purchased, whether they have a subscription or not. Shipping type, discount applied, promo code used. Previous purchases could be interesting, right? Payment method and frequency of purchases, which fortnightly. Who made this data set? Anyway. I wouldn't use fortnightly to describe frequency of purchases. I think that's supposed to be like the subscription timing, right? I guess would be how often are we shipping things on your subscription. We're just going to ignore that column though, because that's a lot of stuff going on there. So what's going on? What's represented here is e-commerce purchases, like we talked about. What details do we have about the purchases? So everything we talked about just now: category, subcategory, price, size, and color. And what about the customer? We have some information on the customer themselves. We have age, gender, location. Subscription status is a yes or no Boolean. So different people in the organization will care about different things about this data set, right? So product, it might have some questions like which categories and subcategories are the best performing? Maybe which states are selling the most and why are they selling, or what are they selling, right? So this is like a product question, because if I know that in the Northeast, handbags, pink handbags, medium size, sell really well, right, then maybe I'm going to look to make partnerships with other handbag companies so I can sell more handbags in the Northeast, right? So we're going to open up opportunities for the organization based on what we already know about our current client base. So, and about the products we're selling and about the things that are going on behind the scenes. So product might have some questions. Also, when we talked about states that are selling the most, supply chain probably cares about that too, right? Our manufacturing partners probably care about which states are selling the most, because they might want to know this, because they might want to send from a decentralized distribution center to a local distribution center, but the local distribution center only has so much storage, right? So they can't just be holding on to things. They have to get it, hold it for a couple of days, and then send it back out. So we want to make sure that we can give some guidance. This is going to go a lot farther than data analysts, right? There's going to be like people specialized in this field, but this would be a good way to start if you don't have like those job recs opened up, because you might get stuck in this really weird area where you have to do something you definitely don't know how to do, but you can at least do the thing you do know how to do, which is like, okay, I can't answer that question with like the optimization model and Jarobi that you need me to answer, but I can build something in a Tableau or a Power BI to show you like, hey, in the Northeast, like these things, these products specifically move really fast. So you want to be restocking them more, and these items over here move really slow. So you don't need to restock them so often, right? The supply chain might have these questions. What are we selling? Because we probably won't want to send huge winter coats down to Florida, right? Like it's not in our best interest as a company to do something like that. So, and then et cetera, right? These questions can go on and on and on, right? Questions are never ending, but I just wanted to get a couple examples here. So now I'm marketing, and I have some questions and I need you, the data analyst, to answer using data that we have. So I really like handbags, right? So where should I focus my marketing efforts for handbags is one of my questions. I want to know from some ads what colors are most popular amongst our products. For shirts as well as pants, what are the most common colors? What are our highest rated products so I can market these more? Are subscriptions more common or one-off purchases? And how old do people buy from us, right? So there's a number of questions that I might have to be able to ask you. And from here, you don't necessarily need to start like doing the coding, right? The first thing you're going to want to do is like just start coding to like answer the questions, right? Like, okay, I gave you a question. Let me just like pandas group by aggregate some, here you go, like here's your answer. But past that, right, maybe there's some other things that you can do. Maybe there's other data you can pull in. And so what I wanted to at this point was to take a couple minutes, maybe 5 and 5. I had two main questions and follow-ups for you. Is what follow-up questions do you have for me? And then how would you start getting the answers to these questions if I'm able to answer your follow-ups? Or if you want to start talking about, right, you can split this up. What follow-up questions do you have for me? You can chop it, you can stop, and then you can say, okay, if I don't get any answers to my follow-up questions, because sometimes that happens where they're just like, I don't know, how would you get the answers to some of these, right? How would you can start thinking about it? But what I want to challenge you, right, is what follow-up questions do you have? Like get you thinking about, okay, don't just let me come to you as a business partner and give you questions. Like, come back with me with questions. You're allowed to ask questions also. So that's something I'm looking for. So if you want to take a couple minutes, maybe with the person next to you, get a couple things, and then we can talk about it as a group too. Yeah. Assume the data is pristine, is beautiful. Okay. First thing I want to see, did people have, like, is it easy to think of follow-up questions? That's the first question I have for you as a group. Is it easy to think about what questions you would have for me? Or at least in this situation, was it? You came up with lots of follow-up questions. It was always really easy. For both of you. Yeah. Okay, great. Anyone else? Let's have difficulties thinking about follow-up questions, or was it easy? Okay, take that as easy. What are some of those questions that y'all had? Oh, yeah. Okay, so we have, let's write this down too. Nope. So I want to do some follow-up questions. Was segmenting by segments? So just like, are we segmenting on essentially like any other feature? Yeah? That was a good one. Seasons, location, etc. Anyone else follow up questions?
Maybe the geographical distribution of the marketing about which region is more popular, something like that.
You said the distribution of like which regions? Yeah. So which distribution of purchases by state, kind of? Yeah, good. What you got?
Should we ditch the small size, the extra large size? Stuff like that, it doesn't sell much.
Using certain sizes that don't sell a lot. Stop marketing, advertising. What else? So for the distributions of purchases by state, all right, I'd come back to you and I'd say, well, why don't you tell me? You're the data guy, right? So that's also like I gotten into that trap before where I'll ask questions that then they come back to me and they're like, okay, I need you to answer that. Now it becomes a new question for them because they didn't think about that question. I thought about that question. I was like, oh, what? I might want to answer that. So I would ask them like, what do you think about this? And they're like, oh, that's a really good question. Can you get that for me too? And then I realize I'm the one that has to answer that question. That was a fun exercise for me. Should we stop advertising certain sizes that don't sell a lot? I like that. Like, do you want to keep focusing on multiple areas, or do you want to kind of like limit down your scope and really just focus on the things that are selling the most? And then obviously, segmenting on other features or combining with other features is a great question to ask, right, for marketing. If I think about like where should I focus marketing efforts for handbags, right? If that's the question that marketing is coming to me with, then of course the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say why. I say why does it matter, right? Why does it matter like where are you focusing your marketing efforts? It's like, okay, well if I focus my marketing efforts in on the South, handbags don't really sell in the South. Like, okay, why? Oh, like then you start like peeling back the layers of like, okay, handbags, because then if you let like get me where should I focus marketing efforts for handbags, and I say, okay, like why? They say South doesn't do a lot of business, and I say why, and they say, well, we don't really have much of a presence in the South, and I say, oh, so you let like the cart become before the horse, right? You're saying you don't want to focus in on the South, even though you asked me where I should focus, and you're already telling me you don't want to see the South in this final product that I give you. It's like you already know what you want to see, and you're still asking me these questions. It's like, let me ask you why. And then they start to figure some things out, like, oh, we don't really have much of a presence in the South. It's like, well, why not? Like, well, we don't really do much marketing there. So, okay, so if I do this analysis and I find that the Northeast sells the most, well, it's also because you market in the most in the Northeast, right? So, of course, it's going to sell the most. So they have this question about where should I focus, but then I do the data analysis, and I'm going to do all this work to get you the answers to the things that you already know because you're the one that runs the marketing campaigns. So you're asking me this when at the end of the day, like, that's why the data analyst has to come back and be like, well, why does it matter? Right? Why does it? Because you wouldn't maybe have thought about that, but why does it matter where you're focusing marketing efforts? And then oftentimes, they come back with like a legitimate like thing. It's like, okay, well, maybe we can't do it here, or maybe like we're thinking that we're seeing like fluxes of purchases of these in other places, so we want to focus in marketing in those places where we're seeing increased purchase habits or something. Like they have a real hypothesis, but sometimes their hypothesis is based on things that they've created. Like this very system they created has cause them to develop a hypothesis that you can then refute by just asking why like twice. And then you come down to this like, oh, maybe we should not let our bias dictate where we're going to sell just because that's where we sell the most right now. Or that's up to you as the data analyst to come back at them with like, how do you want me to tell you where to market? Like maybe instead of why, it's like, how do you expect me to come to that decision? And then if they say, I don't know, you're the data guy, do it, or data person, do it. Like that's fine too. That happens a lot. But you can have another question about like, okay, well, like you can ask why. Like either how or why oftentimes are really good questions to ask because they have something in their head, right? And you really want to peel back that thing that they have in their head before you spend 40 hours, like an entire week working on this thing that just like is not what they wanted. And it's like you just wasted your entire week on this thing. And then now your manager's like, you have 3 items in your backlog where you're not working on them. And then you have to go back and spend the whole next week on this thing. So that's why you should also involve them in the process, right, as we start to pick these things apart. Okay, great. Did anyone get follow-up questions for any of the other questions, or did we focus on the first one? Anyone think about any of the other ones that we had up here on the board? I just wanted to give a couple for people to look at. Yes. So do I care about for shirts as well as pants? And if that's what I'm asking, do I care about segmenting? And do I care about, again, combining with other features that I have in my data set to maybe get me more an enriched analysis? Yeah. So the first, are we segmenting on any other feature is a good one. And it'll probably add some work to your plate because they hadn't thought about it. And now they're thinking about it. And now they say, yeah, absolutely. Like if you can just segment on everything, that would be great. And then if you just make all those combinations, it's only like 10 factorial, right? So it should be easy to get that many combinations up. I like that though, right? Continuing to ask, like, is this the end of your line? Like, are you done at what shirts and pants do I care about? And what are the most common colors in those shirts and pants? Or is there going to be a follow-up question when I say, okay, for shirts, blue is the most common color. Like that's it. That's the answer, right? Like if you're the data analyst, like that's it. Like I just did group by sum and I did it and I got you the answer. So blue is the most common color. Okay. Now I'm the product manager or I'm marketing and I'm going, see, that just doesn't really answer. I thought it would, but it didn't. Like they don't, sometimes they don't even arrive. Like they don't know how far it needs to go until you give them the answer. And they go, shit, yeah, no, that's not what I need. And then you get stuck in this rat wheel of being the person that they come to with ad hoc questions. And like, hey, can you get me this? Can you get me that? Can you get me that? And then you turn into like their assistant. And that can't happen, right? So we have to like work with our managers and work with the people around us to like, if we have someone that's doing this, that's just like these 5 questions, maybe these 5 questions happened once a day, Monday through Friday. Right. And it's not like you can just pop into your magic tool and like go grab the answer and then hand it to them. It's like these are some queries that I have to write. And now I just have these garbage queries that need to go to the graveyard that are like I just write them and I delete them later. Like it's just wasted effort and it's wasted work because also whatever I tell you is old news in like 2 days. Like whatever I tell you is now already shifted because we're working in like a live environment. We're not working with CSVs. So these things are changing every day. So it's like, okay, if this is something you really care about, you find that out by asking why 2 or 3 times. You find out, okay, like what's the real cause behind this? Let's now think about like, can we set up a project around this? Can we like create the dashboard, but create a dashboard that's like refreshing once a day, that has, some triggers in it, and then also some catches for whenever it's failing. So that way I don't have to go back and fix it also every day. And you're getting the answers to your questions, but you're not just getting this one time now, you're getting it delivered every day. So this is like the marketing person. These are like random questions that you'll get as a data analyst that you have to figure out, is this worth me right now? Like going in and figuring this question out, or do we need to have a larger conversation around why do you have these questions? Why do you come to me once a day with these questions? And like, how can we alleviate this? Because this becomes a big like bogger for you, because even if that question only takes 30 minutes of your time to like go in and do, and maybe like you have to do a join and a couple of group buys, even if it only takes 30 minutes, it really took you like an hour and a half, because it took you time to have that Teams chat with that business partner or that Slack chat. It took you time to maybe say, hey, let's hop on a call. You hopped on a 15-minute call. You talked about it. You figured out what that question actually was. You went in. You spent the 30 minutes getting the answer. You delivered it to them. They had a quick follow-up question, and then you delivered the follow-up question. And now that 20-minute task has now taken almost 2 hours of your day, because you're just like letting the business partner do the thing, right? And then you probably had a call in there in the middle. So really, it took you like the full first half of the day just to get the answer to this question around like what's the most common color for shirts in our databases, right? Like you just spent 4 hours working on this, and like that's just not productive. Being a data analyst or even a data scientist who's doing data analyst work, right? To have these kinds of conversations with business partners is like, you can't keep coming to me with these like ad hoc one-off questions. And what types of things do I need to do as the analyst to make sure that when you have these questions, we can create maybe a ticketing system or a queue or a backlog or some way to keep track of these questions, keep track of how often they're asked, and then start to derive ways to create products that give the answers every day, or maybe every couple hours even, to the product team, to the marketing team, to help them not have to come to you all the time with questions. So that's definitely like, when I get these types of questions, I'm really just asking why, like why and how have you done it before, right? Has this really been your way of solving this problem? Like the entire time you've been here, is you just come to someone, maybe you're new, because I keep switching companies. Maybe you're new and you've been there for 2 months and they come to you with that question. You're like, you've been here for 10 years. Like there's gotta be a better way to do this than you just coming to me and asking me this question. So that's where you start learning. But yeah, go ahead. Yes. Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear your opinion on this too, Zoe. But from my experience, self-service data analytics is like a really slippery slope, because people start like, right, and like giving answers that are not right because they just wrote a couple lines of SQL and they pulled it from a database. But like it's also like a larger problem around data modeling, and where, like, do we store the data right, and is all the data in the right information, and does customer ID that's in the product schema also, is that the same thing as customer ID in the marketing schema? Like you start to get into fuzzy areas because also of how we do data modeling. So I would say no to I usually say no to self-service data analytics. I know there are people, like companies that do it, and there's companies that do it well. But it's also like a larger organization question around like how your whole thing is structured. But I normally stay away from it, which is why we get into dashboards, right? It's why we get into Power BI and Tableau, where we start creating those, and we have to have like iterations upon iterations of these dashboards that also get built alongside our business partners. So that way we make sure that the very KPIs that they're interested in, the metrics that they want to measure, are measured appropriately and accurately in those dashboards, and also updated at the right frequencies. So that way, if it needs to be updated twice a day, it can be updated twice a day, and those numbers are always fresh, and they don't have to come to me with those questions. Instead of them running a select star from twice a day and like trying to like pick all that apart, we've built that for them, and then they can go to this dashboard, see it, and then keep doing their job, right? So that's why it's that like self-service analytics is good, I think, willed, right? Like it means well, like I want to give you access to the data, but it oftentimes, in my experience, just becomes so much more of a hairball and a mess than it's intended to be. That's my experience of it, at least. What do you think, Zoe? Yes. Yeah.
So there's definitely not all access all the time data and visualization is definitely the way we serve up the data to people. But I do find it interesting. Some of our business users download data from Tableau so they can play with it in Excel because they might be able to do more with it and do it in that. And they're trying to wean them away from that by making better dashboards. Their Excel data doesn't keep updating the way the Tableau dashboards are updating.
Yep.
They'll present something with outdated data based on their Excel analysis.
That'll never go away. Excel will never go away. Excel's not going anywhere. If you want to learn VBA, it's okay, because Excel's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I'm not sure that a lot of, like the team I'm on right now, I don't think the business partners know SQL. They can do stuff in Excel. So they don't understand why it's taking me all day to find this magical piece of data.
Mm-hmm.
Before. Well, it's not labeled with these dashboards, labeled, sales channel CD. That's matching to trade planner CD.
Yup. Our normalized fact tables have codes in them that connect back to the dimension tables, and then we have to join the fact table and the dimension table to get the actual name value of that code, because that CD is a code. Yeah.
Yeah, the dimension table, it's every product we ever made.
Right.
Has 700 columns.
But I'm the marketing guy, and I just like pulled this together in like 5 minutes in my Excel, and like I got that number. So it should take you like 10 minutes in your magic data tool. Yeah. That was a good question about self-service data, self-service access. Also, access is a big thing. We have a lot of access to. I'm in pharma right now, and access like huge, right? Like governance and access is probably the hottest topic that we work with, even though it's probably the most boring for all of the students in here. Like it's super important to be working and like separating your schemas, so that way you have like data for this company and data for this company if you're working with like clients, like spread out. And so then sometimes you have a use case where you need to see aggregated metrics across all the companies, and like self-service can't do that because they only have access to one of those databases, right? And so that's definitely another issue too, is like access, and people can't have access to everything. It's the principle of least access, or whatever this is called. You're just supposed to give anyone like the access they need and no more, type of thing. Any other questions, comments about this piece of it? Awesome. That was actually, did anyone start thinking about how they would start getting the answers to these questions? That was actually the easy part, right? It was just like group buys and pandas. But if you were to start doing that part, right, it's just kind of picking apart and reading the questions and, okay, like, where should I focus marketing efforts for handbags? I actually think that's a pretty good example of where you might get yourself into the like self-written prophecy. If you just say, okay, the marketing effort should be focused where the most sales are, that might be a thing that isn't right depending on the situation. So that's where your soft skills come into play, because your first answer on number one, if I just want to answer that question, where should I focus marketing efforts on handbags, group by handbag, some state, I don't know, group by location, and some sales for handbags, and that's it. Like, that's where I want to start focusing my marketing efforts. But that might not be right? Because maybe there's other opportunities that you're missing out just by looking at the places that have the most. Or if you do it by the least, because you're like, okay, we don't have enough sales here, we should probably market to get our sales up in these areas. Maybe there's only 10 people that live there, right? Why are you going to market when there's 10 people that live there, right? So there's other confounding factors and other features you would bring in to this. And this data set might not have it, right? But what does our data set have? And we come back up and look at it. Our data set has location, so it has the state, and it's poorly named, right? But it's the state of where that sale happened. So if we were to do something like a least popular, right, state to sell these things in, so we start marketing in there and sell it more, we'd want to go to the census, because if maybe we don't have this data internally, maybe we have to go out and get it externally. Census has an API. You'd want to build some pipelines around the census API and start bringing that information in, so that way you can have like the population of the state. Ideally, you'd have, like in this example, you should have a zip code for a purchase like this, so you could get down to the zip code level and figure out where maybe there's been a lot more people moving in the last year or two, and we really need to start moving there. Like, we don't have sales there, but there's a lot of people coming. We should start doing some marketing there. So that would be one way of saying, okay, where can I focus in, right, my marketing efforts for handbags, other than just saying, like, where are we selling the most? Let's keep going. Or where are we selling the least? Like, let's bring it up. There's other data you can bring in, and a lot of times there's data that you don't have in front of you that you can use. It just means you have to, like, go out and get it, and whether that's API calls or other things. But there's a lot of weather APIs that are streaming APIs or batch APIs, and then there's also census. Anything census is like public domain, right? You can use anything from the census, and I've done this before. I volunteered with an organization just after I graduated grad school, and all we did, right, was just pretty much build pipelines from census APIs to build data into Shiny dashboards in R. It was with Nick from the IAA. And so all that data is like, you can use it because it's out there. It's out there for you to use. So maybe that's something you would bring in this situation. And you could do that for the rest of the questions too. But really just wanted to focus on follow-up questions, right? Because we can all day just write some pandas and get answers to questions. But I wanted to make sure we thought about follow-up questions. We think about why, we think about how, we think about what are the real things that are going on here and why am I being asked these questions. Because as a data analyst, if we're just running around being a yes man and getting you the answer to that question you asked me 5 minutes ago, right, I don't get my work done that I need to be focusing on. And then you also get more exposure to the business. You get more trust in the business by doing things like this, because when you start challenging people in like a professionally appropriate way, in like a way that shows that you respect them, you just have questions that need to be answered, then you start gaining respect yourself in the organization, and that helps a lot to go a lot further. So that's it. That's all I have. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Anyone want to leave us with a thought? Awesome.